After 5 years of lies, I exposed my boyfriend's secret wife. 19 years later, he messaged me, "You remember me?" Now he's alone, broke, and I'm happily married with 4 kids. When I think back now, I'm still shocked at how much I tolerated in my early 20s. I was young, naive, and convinced that love was supposed to hurt a little. I started dating this guy when I was barely out of high school, and for almost 5 years, he was my entire world, even though he didn't treat me like I was his. From the very beginning, there were signs I should have run from. He was older, more experienced, and always seemed to have the upper hand. I thought that made him mature. In reality, it just made him controlling. He never introduced me to his friends, never wanted me around his family, and never took me out anywhere in our city. If we went on a date, it was always late at night and far away from anywhere people might recognize us. At the time, I told myself it was because he liked privacy. Now I know it was because he was constantly cheating and didn't want to risk anyone seeing us together. I've always been fairly humble about my looks. When I was younger, people told me I was beautiful, but I never really believed it. I just thought of myself as cute. He, on the other hand, seemed determined to chip away at any confidence I had. He'd make little comments about how I wasn't his type, or how other girls were more attractive. Looking back, I realized that was part of the emotional abuse, keeping me insecure, so I wouldn't leave. 4 years, I lived in this strange reality where I felt both lucky to have him and desperate to earn his love. I missed obvious red flags. I ignored my gut when things didn't add up. I brushed off how often he would go out with friends, but wouldn't answer his phone for hours. Then one day, something strange happened. A mutual acquaintance, someone who knew my older brother, reached out and said we needed to talk. He wouldn't tell me over the phone, but he made it clear it was about my boyfriend. My first thought was that maybe he had been arrested or gotten into some kind of trouble. My second thought, which I tried to push away, was that it had to be about another woman. We arranged to meet at a small coffee shop. I remember walking in, heart pounding, half hoping it was nothing, half knowing it was going to change everything. He sat across from me, looking almost uncomfortable to be the one to tell me, and then he just came out with it. "I think you should know he's married." For a moment, I honestly didn't understand. Married? How? We had been together for almost 5 years. He'd been in my life nearly every day. How could someone live a double life like that without slipping up? Apparently, he had met another woman about a year before and married her in secret. This acquaintance had put it together because he knew both of us and couldn't live with keeping it quiet anymore. I just sat there, staring at my coffee, trying to piece it together. I'd wasted my early 20s on someone who was living an entirely separate life behind my back. That was the moment something in me finally shifted. I left that coffee shop feeling like my entire life had been turned upside down, but at the same time, it all started to make sense. Every excuse, every late-night hangout, every time he avoided taking me anywhere, it all added up now. Once I got home, I sat on my bed and just stared at my phone. I didn't cry right away. I think I was too numb. But then the anger hit. 5 years. 5 years of my life, wasted on someone who didn't even respect me enough to tell me the truth. I didn't know what to do at first, but one thing was clear. I needed to find his wife. Not to fight, not to yell, but because she deserved to know. I didn't know her personally, but I tracked her down through social media. I sent her a simple message. "You don't know me, but I think you need to see this." Attached were photos of us together over the years, vacations, birthdays, random nights at my apartment. There was no way he could explain them away. She replied within the hour. We spoke on the phone, and at first, she was quiet. I could hear the disbelief in her voice, the way she wanted so badly for this to be a mistake. I know that feeling, wanting to protect the version of someone you've built in your head. By the end of the call, she thanked me for being honest. She said it hurt like hell, but she'd rather know the truth now than live in a lie. A few weeks later, she reached out again and told me she had filed for divorce. She even used my messages, photos, and testimony to back her case. She took him for everything she could, and honestly, I didn't feel an ounce of guilt about that. I ended things with him immediately. There was no conversation, no closure. I packed up my life and moved to another city. I thought putting physical distance between us would help me heal, and in some ways it did. Still, he found ways to haunt me. Every so often, there'd be some strange reminder of him, an anonymous call, a mutual acquaintance mentioning they'd seen him. Once, I even caught him watching me from across a parking lot. It was unsettling, but I told myself he'd eventually lose interest. For the next 5 years, I focused on myself. I stayed single the entire time. It wasn't that I didn't meet good men. I just didn't want to bring my baggage into someone else's life until I had truly worked through it. I didn't want to punish the next person for his mistakes. That's when I met my husband. We clicked immediately, but more importantly, he made me feel safe. I didn't have to fight for his attention or wonder if I was enough. He showed me that relationships aren't supposed to feel like a constant test. We got married, and a couple of years later, we had our first child. Life was calm, stable, and full of love, everything I had once thought was impossible. Eventually, we made the decision to move back to the same area I had lived in during my relationship with my ex. My family was there, and I wanted my child to grow up surrounded by them. I'll admit, the thought of being near him again crossed my mind. But after all those years, I figured he had moved on. Surely he had other people to bother. I was wrong. It had been 7 years since I left that city, and I had built a completely different life. But not long after moving back, the past came creeping in. It started small. I'd noticed the same unfamiliar car parked near our house a little too often. Sometimes I get this gut feeling that someone was watching me when I was out running errands. At first, I brushed it off. Maybe I was just being paranoid because of our history. Then one afternoon, I saw him. He wasn't doing anything obvious, just standing in the distance near a store parking lot, pretending to be on his phone. But I knew that posture, the way he'd half turn away when I looked in his direction. My stomach tightened. He hadn't changed much, except for a few more gray hairs. The worst part, he was smiling, like seeing me again was some kind of game. That night, I told my husband. He took it seriously immediately. He knew my history, knew exactly how damaging those years had been. From that moment on, he made it clear that my ex wasn't going to get away with this. One evening, not long after, my husband caught him in the act, lingering near our property line. My husband confronted him, and the situation escalated enough that the police got involved. That was the last time I saw him, or at least, I thought it was. After that, we went on with our lives. We had more kids, moved into a bigger house, and filled our days with school events, family dinners, and everything I had once dreamed of. I truly believed he was gone for good. Fast forward 19 years after I ended it with him, nearly 2 decades of my life without being with him, yet somehow, he was still there in the shadows. One afternoon, I was checking my Facebook Messenger to reply to some people interested in renting one of our properties. In the message requests folder, I saw it, a message from someone I hadn't thought about in years. It was him. All it said was, "Hey Al, you remember me?" I just stared at the screen for a long time. I could feel every bit of the old anger and disgust bubbling up. He had to know how unwelcome he was in my life. He had to know that nothing about this was okay. I didn't respond. I knew exactly how this would go if I did. It would just feed his ego, give him the satisfaction of knowing he could still get under my skin. Instead, I blocked him immediately. That was it. No dramatic send-off, no final confrontation. Just silence. If he was looking for a reaction, he didn't get it. If he was looking for some kind of opening back into my life, he got a closed door. Today, I'm happily married to the same man I met after healing from that relationship. We have 4 beautiful children and a life filled with love, family, and 0 drama. And honestly, that's the best revenge there is, living well, without giving him a single piece of my peace. But here's what I wonder, how is it possible for someone to still hold on to an obsession after all these years? 19 years is a long time to cling to a person you betrayed, abused, and lost.